as we become more familiar with the body of wisdom, it's actually the most favorable place to reside, because the mind comes into alignment and supports the body of wisdom when we're functioning from effortless being. And similarly, the emotions support effortless being. So the emotions, when they're tracking the mind, then there's a lot of turbulence. Whereas when we're resting as effortless being, then the mind supports the body of wisdom, and also the emotions tend to support things like intuition and inspiration. Because, for instance, when you invited me to have another conversation with you, that gave rise to a sense of inspiration. So that sense of inspiration is accompanied with a feeling of joy, because that's giving you a sort of insight as to the direction to go. So I was very inspired in that way. And that's how we can utilize functioning from the body of wisdom, and how it becomes a much more joyful and inspirational and expansive way to function.
Welcome to Letting Go and the Greatest Secret, where we explore the end of your suffering and the beginning of lasting happiness. I'm Hale Dwoskin, and today we'll be talking again with David Bingham, who was a featured teacher along with me in Rhonda Byrne's book, The Greatest Secret. David was an ordinary, everyday person like you and me, with one difference. After 20 years of searching, he discovered the truth while listening to a podcast, like you are doing right now. David is now a teacher who has helped many realize their true nature. David, you were saying something, you wanted to say something about Lester, and I'm all ears.
Great. Yes. Well, yeah, I noticed the photo of Lester in the background, and it just reminded me of something which Lester said, which was very important to me, which is, he says that we begin and remain as the infinite being, but then we draw a very wide circle around ourselves and call it the causal realm. And the way I understand that is that certainly we remain as the infinite being, and then we actually, the first realm we enter into, which is a limitation, because our infinite nature is simply attributeless being.
Yes.
But we can then enter into the body of bliss, and the only thing present in the body of bliss is bliss. And from there we go into the causal realm, and really the causal realm is where all forms appear equally and effortlessly. So they could be thoughts, sensations, perceptions, and they all just they're all just arising. So for very young children, before the age of 2, that's how we experience. It's just that all forms arise equally and effortlessly. So things which later in life we consider to be personal, so things like the body, mind, or thoughts, or emotions or sensations, they're seen to be arising equally with everything else. So there could be the sound of a car going by, or there could be an emotion, or there could be a sensation, there could be the sound of voices, there could be wind in the trees, and all those forms arise equally without any judgment. So that's really the causal realm, where everything is arising. So it's still a unified field, but the difference between our infinite nature, which is attributeless, and the causal realm is that forms arise effortlessly in the causal. And then we draw an even smaller circle around ourselves, and we call it the astral realm. And I remember Lester describing this sequence. And so the astral realm is a dualistic realm. So the way we're tempted into there is usually by some kind of comparison. So we would be comparing, say, 2 beautiful objects. It could be 2 beautiful flowers or 2 beautiful beings. But the way we go deeper into there is, because it's dualistic, there is the opportunity for there to be either opposition or conflict. So we can be drawn down into those realms. And so from there, we can go into the etheric realm, which is the emotional realm. And if the mind's predominating, the emotions tend to be quite turbulent because they're following the thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
And then we draw an even smaller boundary around ourselves, and we call it the physical realm. And that boundary is really, for most people, the boundary of the physical body. So they're saying everything inside this boundary is me, and everything outside is not me.
Yes.
And I love
that's the most constricted realm.
Yes, exactly. But I love Lester's description, because we remain as the infinite being, but we have these 5 realms of experience, and it isn't as though we become trapped in the physical. The 5 koshas, or those 5 sheaths, actually remain, and it's like having a garage with 5 cars in there, and we have these 5 vehicles that we can jump into and experience each of those realms at any time.
Yes. Lester also used to say that we're in all the realms at the same time.
Yes.
It's just that where most of us are focused on is the physical realm and the realm of thought and emotion, and
yes.
the realm of conflict, which is I guess the astral realm.
Yes.
And most of us have forgotten that we're actually experiencing the causal realm, or the realm of
yes.
ideation, all the time.
Yes.
And we're not realizing it. We're so
yes.
lost in the denser realms that we don't see it.
Yes.
And that bliss realm, even though we're experiencing it all the time, we're so focused on the other realms we don't notice it. And when we think we're experiencing pleasure or joy from something that's happened in the physical realm, it's actually just that
yes.
realm of bliss just simply shining through. And all of that is contained within that non-dual,
yes,
effortless, choiceless, changeless, pure awareness
yes.
that we actually are. All these other realms are just superimpositions. As he said, you
yes.
just draw these smaller and smaller circles around yourself, but in actuality, you never do. It's just
yes, we remain as the infinite, and they're
yes.
all existing within our infinite nature.
Yes. Yes.
But yes, I love the way Lester described the way the body of bliss is available, because it's actually really liberating in a materialistic sense, because many people feel as though they need to acquire things to make them happy. But I love the way Lester collapses that notion in the way he says, well, actually, when we achieve whatever it is we're seeking, this bliss arises, but it isn't because we've attained the object. It's because all of the effort involved in pursuing it actually just falls away, and the bliss that was already there just appears. And I think that's amazing knowledge.
Yes. No. Again, there's even though Lester often spoke in a more dualistic way than a lot of the non-dual teachers of our generation talked, he clearly was completely aware of truth.
Yes.
And he had a real affinity for the yogic way of describing it. The koshas is what you just described, is a very yogic way of describing it. And
yes,
Lester really resonated with that way of describing. It's interesting. There were several things he resonated with. One was he actually used the Bible as a teaching tool.
Wow.
And he did that because so many of the people who knew were involved in the Christian faith. And so he went to the Bible first because he wanted to see if he could use it as a teaching tool.
Yes.
And he found things in it that he could point to as truth. One of the ones actually was one of the things he used to say about it having to do with the Bible was he used to explain there's a line in the Bible is I am the way, and he said that was a mis translation. It's actually I am is the way.
Right, brilliant, yes. That's really
Because
great.
when we really recognize what I am, it
Mm.
disappears, revealing that
Yes,
pure,
yes,
changeless self that
yes,
we are. And the
yes.
other thing that relates to the Bible is, he said, in, instead of believing in Christ,
Mm.
believe as Christ believed.
Yes.
And so he
Mm.
would use things like that. But getting back to the koshas and yogic teachings, Lester actually was aware of other lifetimes. And he said that he had many lifetimes as a yogi. And
Mm. Mm.
and that was part of the reason that I believe that teaching came in so strongly.
Yes,
And the last
yes.
thing about that is he actually introduced me to the teachings of Ramana.
Wow, brilliant.
When I met Lester in 1976, he must have known that I would really resonate with it. But
Mm.
he introduced me to Ramana Maharshi in
Mm.
1977. I
Mm.
remember where, even in Central Park. We were in.
Oh, brilliant.
I took the Sedona method in 1976 at the end of the year in
Mm.
New York City,
Mm.
and West and I were in Central Park, and he said, you really need to study also the teachings of Ramana Maharshi, because that's the
Mm.
closest to my teachings.
Mm.
Ramana's
Mm.
teachings were. It was only later that he found out about Nisargadatta, because I
Mm.
introduced him to Nisargadatta, and
Oh.
I was his caregiver as at the end of his life. I was one of his main
Mm.
caregivers,
Mm.
and he used to have me read from Nisargadatta as his bedtime story. He really liked that.
He was probably aware of your previous lifetimes as well. You were probably in a monastery together, which is why I
Probably.
handed the Sedona method over to you.
Yeah, I'm sure we had some deep connection, because
Mm.
he was my first true teacher,
Mm.
and we had a pretty close relationship for 18 years. I wasn't with him that whole time.
Mm.
I learned the Sedona method in New York, and then not long after that, a few years later, he moved back to Arizona, and I stayed in New York. But
Mm.
we stayed in touch, and I took all his programs and courses, and
Mm.
stayed very engaged in teaching.
Mm.
But yeah, no. When I first met Lester, there was this instant connection,
Mm. Mm.
and I never experienced that before with another
Mm.
teacher.
Mm.
So, what else did you want to say about these? Anything else you wanted to
But
say about the?
yes, well, really just how to navigate between them, because the koshas are ever present, they exist within us, and so we do have access to all of them. So a really important thing to know is that there's a dividing line between the mental body and the body of wisdom, which is because the causal realm is, it could be described as the body of wisdom or effortless being, because it's where all forms arise equally and effortlessly. So the dividing line between the mental body and the body of wisdom, or the causal realm, is the dividing line between effort and effortlessness, because the body of wisdom is available effortlessly. So it's just really noticing the forms appearing. So there could be thoughts appearing effortlessly, there could be emotions appearing effortlessly, and there could be sensations. And so when we know that, we can actually rest as that. And we can rest as that in any moment, because it's just really noticing the forms arising without any judgment.
Yes.
And then we also have the option to engage the mind. So if there's something which is arising, so there could be there could be a perception, or there could be the sound of something, and then we can consciously engage the mind to comment on that. But it's really good to make that distinction, because as we become more familiar with the body of wisdom, it's actually the most favorable place to reside, because because the mind comes into alignment and supports the body of wisdom when we're functioning from effortless being. And similarly, the emotions support effortless being. So the emotions, when they're tracking the mind, then there's a lot of turbulence. Whereas when we're resting as effortless being, then the mind supports the body of wisdom, and also the emotions tend to support things like intuition and inspiration. Because if something is arising, for instance, when you invited me to have another conversation with you, that gave rise to a sense of inspiration. So that sense of inspiration is accompanied with a feeling of joy, because that's giving you a sort of insight as to the direction to go. So I was very inspired in that way. And that's how we can, that's how we can utilize functioning from the body of wisdom, and how it becomes a much more joyful and inspirational and expansive way to function.
So let me see if I'm getting this correctly. I agree with you, but I want to make sure it's clear for everyone. So basically, there's several things that whenever you open and let go or recognize the truth of who you are, all form may drop away, and then there's just pure awareness.
Yes.
And then there's nothing to do, no one to do it.
Yes.
But
Absolutely.
often where we end up is this level that you're talking about, which is, some people get confused and they think that's the end state. In fact, many teachers talk about that as though it's the end state, but it's not really the end state. It's exquisitely beautiful, and
yes.
And it's nurturing and full of joy and light and peace. And it is, as you're right, it's definitely the place that functioning happens in life in the most effortless way, because there's no opposition, there's no resistance, there's no struggle. It's just unfolding naturally.
Yeah.
And so how do you help people to, one, distinguish the difference, but more importantly, to how to start to trust that level of being, as opposed to, most of us, unfortunately, will taste this level of being. We may even taste pure non-duality. But then the habit is to go back to identifying as a body mind and hanging out in the smallest circles, as opposed to just being relaxed as the bigger ones.
Yes. The easiest way to achieve that is actually to be consciously aware of the vibrational frequencies within which we function. So we can consciously create a feeling, for instance, of gratitude or love or joy or appreciation. And so having that sense of gratitude for everything, and this is available to everyone, no matter what circumstances we're in, we can actually find a level from which we can have that sensation of gratitude. So within gratitude, we can consciously create a higher frequency of experience. So by doing that and having that sense of gratitude, that actually anchors us much more into the body of wisdom rather than into the mind, because the mind will take us into turbulence, whereas that level of appreciation enables us just to witness the forms arising, and we can just watch them with a sense of appreciation. So we can consciously create a higher frequency of experience, because the human realm, well, actually the realm of consciousness, in essence, is a frequency-based game. So we can, when we know that, we can consciously maintain frequencies which are much more enjoyable and supportive of expansive and positive experience. So that's the one way. But something also which has become apparent, really, as a result of speaking with many people, is that the way we're invited into the lower frequency emotions, which are the ones which take us into the mind rather than keep us in the body of wisdom, are frequencies which we're familiar with. But something that's been quite kind of radical in a way is realizing that each of those emotions are invitations, because the way we have the opportunity to move from attributeless being, as you call, the non-dual state, through the body of bliss, through into the causal realm, into the body of wisdom, the effortless and neutral arising of forms, which is totally non-judgmental, and then on into the astral or the mental realm. There's a level of consent involved in everything, and that's so because we remain as the infinite being, the only way we can actually move from the one to the other is by consenting. And so we can actually consent to lower frequency experiences as well. So, for instance, we can be resting as effortless being, and then there could be an invitation into, say, anger or into fear. And those invitations are given to us. And the way we're conditioned to accept them is because they're personalized. So there tend to be predominant frequencies. So if somebody, for instance, has a predominant frequency of fear, there's a familiarity with that emotion. So if it arises, or if there are events arises which are giving an invitation into that kind of emotion, then because it's familiar, people generally accept the invitation. But it's possible to decline those invitations when we know how the game is played. So declining the invitations is, the way we do that is firstly by knowing that it's an invitation rather than something personal to us, because the way it's compelling is because it appears as though these condition patterns are personally owned. So we believe that they're written into the DNA. We believe that they're personal to us, that we have the past, the memories, and all of these things. But the truth is, as Lester says, that we remain as the infinite being, and so all of those, all the koshas are available to us, but we remain as the pristine being throughout. So even the idea that we're tainted in some way actually is never true. So in any moment, for everyone, we're actually remaining as the pristine being, but then there's an invitation into a lower frequency experience. And because they tend to be habitual, then it's almost like a repeat performance. So if we're familiar with, entering into a state of fear or anger or depression, then we tend to accept those invitations because we're familiar with them. And if we accept them, it's a bit like buying, if we buy something from Amazon, say, there's because we've bought something, consciousness is logged that we've actually made that purchase, and so we get an invitation a few days or weeks down the line to buy something that's similar. And it's very similar to the way the emotions work, because if we accept the invitation into a lower frequency experience, then we're going to be getting an invitation of the same frequency a few days or weeks down the line. So
or a few minutes.
Yeah.
I love that analogy of Amazon, because, there's a marketing technique, and it's not just on Amazon, it's all across the web.
Yes.
What happens is people are tracking your interests.
Yes.
And so when you go from site to site, you'll see ads and suggestions from various sites.
Yes.
That are going to track the same things that you were just looking on Amazon or some other shopping site.
Yes.
And so basically, we get, the mind is presenting these same hooks, or same, as you say, invitations to us, because we bought it before. And and it is just, as you said, it's an accepting, but it's actually a buying it. You're allowing yourself instead of just remaining as that one non-dual state, which actually can't not remain as that, but it's as identifying as that,
Yes.
you start identifying with these things that you bought.
Yes.
And,
Yes.
and just like when you're navigating the web, you don't have to buy everything that someone's selling you. If you did, you'd go broke in a day. Which is how we often feel. We feel like, oh my
Yes.
God, life is a mess.
Well,
it's because
exactly.
we overspent.
Exactly. Because, and it's actually our energy reserves that are compromised, because when we go into those low frequency emotions, they do deplete our energy.
Yes,
and
yes.
So the energetic bank becomes depleted or even overdrawn.
Yes, no, I had the same thought as just before you said that. Where we have this, the more we are just simply at rest as that which we truly are, or at least in those higher realms that you're talking about, which, by the way, these realms don't actually have borders that are physical. No. We think we're actually in every realm, every moment, but seeing it this way is just a way for you to help discern where you're focusing. That's all it is.
Yes.
So don't get too fixated on these different realms.
No.
It's just a useful way. It's just a way of describing it or talking about it. But when you're more at rest as that which you truly are, which is, you have actually infinite energy available to you.
Exactly.
There's no limits.
Yes.
But the more you buy into or identify with the more constricted realms, the more you're constricting that infinite energy more and more and more.
Yes.
And that's why we're exhausted at the end of the day.
It is. It's even it's more sophisticated in a way, because if we look at for instance, the way modern technology is, I'm not sure whether you've had this experience, but sometimes, say you have your cell phone with you, you can be having a conversation with somebody about something really specific, and then 10 minutes later, you open the phone and there's somebody trying to sell that object to you.
Right.
So they're actually listening, and that actually is that's the way the mental level works, because the mental level is actually also a single entity. So it's like, because there is only one being, the mental realm is still one element. So really the human mind is more like a radio receiver for that single system. So it could be seen as the morphogenetic field, but there are different levels at which it functions. And what I've come to see is that the functioning from the body of wisdom is actually functioning from source. So it's functioning from the infinite being, which is a combination of infinite intelligence and infinite love, which results in infinite harmony and infinite potential. Whereas functioning from the mental body is just infinite intelligence, but it doesn't have the component of love involved. So that's why we can get drawn into all sorts of limited experiences, because the intelligence present in the mental body is a limited version. So it isn't the intelligence we're utilizing in the mental body can't access infinite intelligence because it's only half the picture, really.
Yes, if that actually, in my experience, and I'm sure you'll agree with this, the circles aren't really equal. The smallest circle is the physical circle. Lester used to do these diagrams, and when he talked about the different levels, I'm sorry you never got a chance. I know you were familiar with the Sedona method since the 80s, I believe, wasn't it?
Yes.
Well, I'm sorry you never got a chance to actually go to a retreat with Lester, because that was exquisite. Although there were other parts of it that weren't as much fun. I won't get into that, but that was before I was in a teaching role. But when he came, one of the things he did is he had these talks that he'd give, and he would talk about the different realms.
Mm.
And he would put the physical realm as just, the realm would be like this bell curve. And at the very base would be just this very small stick figure to represent the physical realm.
Yes.
And it was very small percentage of the picture.
Yes.
And then the realm, the astral, or the or the more limited mind realm was slightly bigger, but still a fraction of the size of the more expanded realms. And then the paper, although it was way too small, represented that which you truly are, which was beyond all the realms. But the what's practical about this is everyone's probably heard the expression "follow your bliss."
Yes.
It doesn't mean that you just, most people misinterpret it. It may have been in the book. I never read the book, but they think following the bliss is just rearranging things on the deck of the Titanic as it's sinking, and that's somehow going to make you happier. But it's not about it's not about rearranging your life to follow your bliss. It's just that you're getting these inner cues all the time.
Yes. Yes.
Letting go feels blissful.
Yes.
Recognizing what you truly are feels blissful.
Yes.
Yes. A quiet mind feels blissful.
Yes.
The harmony that is natural feels blissful. So if you follow that, as opposed to follow your suffering, which is how most of us live, you're being invited in that direction too. It's not just there are invitations coming from limitation all the time. There's this broader invitation, which is always there in the background, to just stop all this crap.
Yes, exactly. Yes, definitely. And it's a really amazing game, because lots of spiritual teachings begin with the idea that we are the physical body, that we're the body mind, and then we're seeking something called enlightenment, and that we have all of this this mental baggage and emotional baggage that we need to jettison in some way, and then if we can get rid of all of that, then in some way we're going to become enlightened. But it's actually the opposite of that, which is that we begin and remain as the infinite, pristine, effortless, timeless being. And so nobody is actually carrying anything. It's just that if we're in the mental realm, we're receiving these constant invitations. So it seems as though there's no end to the emotions we need to integrate, or the concepts of limitation we need to dissolve. But actually, once we know that they're invitations, but we're remaining as the infinite being, then it's only a matter of declining the invitations. And it's very similar to when we're on holiday. We're on holiday and we're walking along the promenade, and some guy comes along with the invitation to a nightclub, and it's a free invitation, so you go along, and the drinks are usually really expensive.
Right.
And it's not a particularly high vibe, and it's very similar to the invitations into the emotions, because as we're coming out of the nightclub, they usually give us an invitation to go to return to that nightclub the following night for free. And the emotional invitation is very much like that. We go to an emotional party. So it's, there's the anger party, or there's the depression party, or the jealousy party, or any of these low frequency emotions. And we can go to those parties. And then we always get a free invitation as we're leaving. So as the energy or the sort of frequency of those emotions subsides, we're actually receiving a free invitation into the next one. So you can guarantee that as you say, it can even be a few minutes later.
Right.
We're being invited back in again. And so So learning to decline those invitations is really the key, because as it is with invitations to a party or to dinner with someone, if we decline it once, we probably get invited again. But then if we decline 3 or 4 times, we stop getting the invitation. And it's exactly the same with the emotions. If we decline the invitation into the fear or into the anger, then that invitation doesn't come to us, because it's as though the system which is administering the whole thing knows that we won't be accepting the invitation.
Yes.
And when we decline the invitation, we stop getting them completely. And
yes, it's opting out.
Yeah, exactly. But so it doesn't actually take years and years to integrate anything. It's just seeing that it's a constant stream of invitations coming towards us, and if we keep accepting them, then we're going to be having all of this emotional turbulence. But as soon as we realize that, firstly, we can consciously create higher frequencies of experience by things like gratitude, love, appreciation, then we also learn to decline the low frequency emotions, and then we just rest as effortless being, because we're effortless being already. It's just that overlaid on that for some people are turbulent emotions, because they've accepted the invitations to those parties.
Yes. But when you say decline the invitation, you don't mean reject it. It's interesting. It's almost, and please tell me how you see it too. But as you're saying this, it's not really a no. It's a loving no, thank you.
Yes.
Because if you turn it into a no, that's actually accepting the invitation, because then you're fighting with it, you're resisting it, you're struggling. That you've just, because that's what a lot of us do, is we try to not have anger, so we get more anger.
Yes, exactly.
So it's actually a welcoming or an allowing of the invitation, but not taking delivery of it.
Yes,
not buying into it.
Yes.
Would you agree with you? Well, you keep saying yes. I guess you do agree with that.
Well, a couple of practical examples. I've learned the way this functions. I've learned the way this functions by speaking with different people, because people, some people contact me and they actually just want a conversation. I've had lots of people recently, and they've contacted me and they're already self-realized, but they just say, I don't really know anyone I can have a conversation with about this, so I thought I'd make an appointment and have a chat with you. So that's been lovely, really.
Oh, I'm sure that's fun.
Realizing how many people there are already self-realized. So that's, that's really inspiring. But sometimes there's a predominant frequency. So with the whole range of people I speak with, there are some very specific ones. So an example of one is someone who has empathy towards children. So if somebody is disturbed by any kind of suffering to do with children, there can be a frequency which is established on that basis. Now, it's actually a positive thing, because it's based on compassion. So they really love children and they want children to be safe and they want them to be happy. But there can sometimes be an invitation into suffering in that respect. So an example of somebody in that situation, if there's suffering involved, because it's possible to love children, be totally supportive of them, and not be emotionally disturbed. But the way we receive invitations is, and this is how it's been described to me, some people say they've had this feeling of, about vulnerability, for instance, say to do with children or animals, that's another one, or older people. There's quite a funny story. There's a lovely lady I know who had this vulnerability to do with older people. And whenever she saw older people, she'd want to go and take care of them. So she'd go and see that they're okay or carry their shopping or something. And her husband used to say, well, I don't mind you doing that, but don't bring them home. But it's just that because we're the infinite being, whatever frequency we're holding to be true, we're getting invitations on the basis of that frequency. So there are certain people, and they're so specific, and I see this because of the people I'm speaking with. So to go back to the example of someone who feels a sense of vulnerability around children, so they would maybe turn the TV on and there'd be something, coming on the screen, showing that there are children, who don't have enough food, or, they're having to move from their home country, or, so because the world is a reflection of our consciousness, if we have a predominant frequency, we have a predominant theme of suffering. So it depends on what the theme is that we're subscribing to. That actually determines the delivery of the invitations. So somebody who has that feeling, say, towards the vulnerability of children, they're constantly getting invitations into emotional frequencies based on that topic. And as the lady I mentioned, who has this affinity with older people, she was constantly getting that, that she'd go into town and then she'd see older people and maybe they weren't so mobile, and, she'd feel quite compassionate towards them, but it would be emotionally turbulent as well. But once you know what the game is, it's actually easier to decline the invitations because you can see them coming. In the same way as you can see the invitations from Amazon coming. If you bought a book from Amazon, then that in your inbox, you'll be getting lots of invitations to buy books of a similar kind.
Yes,
and
yes.
So that's how it's become really obvious the way this, the way the system works, the way the system of invitation works, because, people, I'm speaking with these people and they're having these very specific experiences. So, for some people, it's, feelings of compassion towards older people and being emotionally disturbed by that. For others, one lady I spoke to was to do with animals. Wherever she looked, there were these images of suffering animals flashing in front of her. And children, that's another theme. Or, it could be, some people are preoccupied with death, for instance. That's another one. So they're constantly getting invitations to subscribe to some sort of funeral plan or something.
Yes. Or when you say invitation too, it's these invitations are really like filters.
Yes.
Because two people can be in the same situation and they're getting different invitations.
Exactly. Yes.
Because they're the things they've already. It's interesting if you look at your belief systems, it's just simply limitations that you've subscribed to. We're sticking with the internet technology description.
Analogy,
We all of us subscribe to different lists or different. We have different interests that we've checkmarked as things we're interested in, and so even in the exact same situations, we're seeing having different experiences because we've subscribed to different lists of things that we're interested in.
Yes.
And the mind is happy to present. Well, what about getting hooked into this? What about getting hooked into that? What about getting hooked into that?
Yes. Yes, exactly. And it's knowing that they're invitations rather than a kind of predisposition, because it's the personalization which makes us identify with those. So if we have a tendency to be triggered in a particular way, so if somebody is being triggered into depression by certain thoughts or images, or experiences from the past is another one, because experiences from the past also provide invitations.
Yes. Well, that's a big one for everyone.
Yes.
Every one of these are all
Yes.
based on past. Actually,
Yes.
all language is based on past. So,
Yes. But it's really it's an amazing game, because something else which has become apparent is that nearly everyone who contacts me has had quite a turbulent childhood. There
yes,
are exceptions.
yes,
I mean, Rhonda had a lovely childhood.
right.
Rhonda, she had a great family and was very loving and very harmonious. But there are usually some challenges at some point. But with many people I speak to, they've had quite turbulent childhood. Quite a turbulent childhood in one way or another. And the challenge, because the game is a challenge, really. It's the challenge of going beyond the limitations of the personalization of those experiences. Because while we're investing in them, and then we're getting repeat invitations back into those frequencies, then they can predominate. And for some people, they predominate for the whole of their life.
Oh, for most people, if you watch most people, they've early on they subscribe to certain belief systems or certain ways of seeing the world, and all they do is, because it's also a filtering, what they do is they filter out all invitations for anything else, and they're just looking for better and better ways to suffer in that particular way. And they're certainly filtering out the invitation that's coming from within them to just settle
Yes.
and be that joy
Yes.
and bliss and
Yes.
stillness that they are.
Yes.
That gets totally lost in their specific invitations. And it's really interesting to watch how most people, we've become lost in
Yes.
our favorite source of invite. But also, I love your analogy of it as an invitation, because there's something very gentle about that, but because it doesn't have to be. I've worked with thousands and thousands of people. Part of where people get caught is they think that's about them.
Yes.
And they think that's my limitation, or I'm the one who responded to all these invitations, which is a lie. But also the invitations themselves are me. That's where people get confused. They think they are this list of invitations to suffer in this particular way, and they forget that they're just invitations. And so if people can see it as just an invitation, not who they are,
yes,
just in seeing it that way, the inclination to answer the invitation, say, yes, I'll buy this, and I want a 10-pack.
Yes.
I often say to people, I can tell the mind was having a special that day.
Yes, a special offer.
Get 2 and buy 1 and get 1,000.
It can be that intense, but the solution is actually really simple, because when the starting point is pristine, attributeless being, which is infinite potential, then we don't need to reintroduce all those limitations. And a really good way to do that is by being attentive to the way we feel during the day. So lots of people and society conditions people into the idea of things like effort, hard work, achieving things in time. So lots of people are frantic and hurried in the way they go about anything, and don't really enjoy anything, because they're always trying to get somewhere else. But what I found in personal experience, and in the experience of lots of people I've spoken with, is that by just being attentive to the frequency of our daily experience, we can transform everything really so completely. So just just thinking, well, how do I want to spend my day today? What's the most joyful and pleasurable way I can do that? And even if people have a responsible job, there's always some time in the day when they can just stop and have that approach, which is just having self-respect to begin with. Because something I say to people, which is totally true, is that you're the infinite being. You deserve some respect. You shouldn't be scurrying around feeling as though you don't have enough time and as though you have all this pressure on you, and that you need to go into all these realms of emotional disturbance. You need to start to, have a set level of self-respect where, you're being kind to yourself, and the way you conduct yourself through the day is to do with giving yourself time to do things and to be allowing life to unfold in a really joyful way. And if you create space, then amazing things can come in. And before we started the conversation, we had that little conversation, about the percentage of time you and I have to spend, actually focusing on this kind of knowledge, and then how much time we have available just to be joyful. And the more we align with our infinite nature, then the more infinite intelligence takes care of things to actually restore balance in our life and experience, so that we do have more time. If we're maintaining a higher frequency consciously, then the only people that can come into those frequencies are people of a similar frequency. If somebody has an idea that they're not lovable, or that that they could never meet somebody that they could be happy with, or they're maintaining lower frequency emotions, the only people that can glide into those kind of lives is people who are a frequency match for them. So just being conscious about the way we structure each day, just to be able to have that sense of self-respect, enjoy the natural environment around us, give people full attention, have a sense of relaxation. And wherever we can create that, we're actually creating a frequency which is much more desirable. And then the ability, it's a much shorter step from that level of ease into effortless being than it is from a frantic, mind-based form of experience.
No, absolutely. I'm going like this as we're going through this, because I love what you're saying. And a lot of people will also think, well, if I don't have time, I don't have time. I can't do that. Well, the thing is that each moment, whether you're in the middle of work, you're driving your car, even in the middle of an argument, you can choose what frequency to either bring to that, yes, or to recognize within that. Because, for instance, yes, if you're having an argument with a loved one, you can focus on where you disagree, or you can focus on, wait a minute, I love this person. Why am I arguing?
Yes.
And so in the beginning, and it's important I think for people to hear this, you might not necessarily change all the external circumstance, but you certainly can start to change your internal reaction, and what you choose to give your focus to, what you choose to be in that moment. Because I love Nisargadatta. He's one of my favorite teachers from the East. Let me see if I can remember the quote. It's interesting. I'm so used to talking from absolutely nothing. Sometimes the specifics disappear. But
I know exactly what you mean. Yes.
But let's see if I can remember the thing that Nisargadatta was tickling me, and he wanted to give me this thing to add to the conversation, but now it's blank. Let's see if it comes back. Yeah. Well, again, it's interesting. It was not about the words, but it's about what's in between the words. I think you agree with this. It's important for people to recognize that we're not giving you another thing to do.
No.
And because when I focused on Nisargadatta, there was just silence.
Yes.
And that silence is there in between, even when you're lost in the absolute most intense invitation there is.
Yes.
And you've bought it hook, line, and sinker, and you've also subscribed to continue getting the same messages. Even then, in between every burst of thought, every sound, every sensation, there is this background that is already whole, complete, enough, still.
Yes.
And in my experience, that's a wonderful way to cut through all of this. You just notice what is changeless. Notice what is right here, right now. Notice what is just that which you truly are. And that happens in an instant.
Yes.
And there's no effort in that whatsoever. It requires zero effort. If you're efforting, that's not it.
Yes. Well, that's really, it's that conditioning to be making an effort and striving that just needs to be relinquished, and then you find it.
Yes.
But it is, because we're conditioned in that way, it's something which we just need to give a little bit of attention to. But seeing that is just always available. Yeah, that's effortless being. It takes no effort to be.
Right. Yeah, and that's what Lester and Ramana and Nisargadatta had in common. They all talked about the highest teachings. Lester used to say this: the highest teachings are the silent teachings.
Yes.
Lao Tzu said the Tao that can be named is not the true Tao.
Yes.
Ramana said something very similar to Lester, that the real teaching is in silence. And when you read a book by Nisargadatta or Ramana, because it's a book, they filter out all the silence.
Yes.
Or Lester. When Lester talked to groups, there was some talking going on, and that's what's been recorded in Happiness is Free, for instance. But those groups that he spoke to, they spent most of their time in silent being. And that teaching is always just, we're swimming in it. We're actually floating in it. Swimming is too much work. We're floating in that every moment, and it's always available to us.
Yes.
And it instantly stills the whole invitation process.
Yes, it does. Yeah, it is. It's so simple, and just realizing that the starting point is pristine, effortless being, and then there's always the option to consent to some kind of frequency experience.
Right.
And the frequency is also based on our own consent. We can consent to lower frequency or higher frequency, and those options are always available.
Yes, absolutely. But again, since you mentioned frequency, the frequency is always, you can't appreciate any frequency. You can't even perceive it without the background.
No.
And as we've been talking about this whole time, the background, the thing that never changes, is that which we truly are.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. Anyway, that went I could keep talking, except that we've already gone on for a while. Yeah. So, do you have anything else? Anything else you want to leave people with or suggest for an exploration?
The information within our conversation, I think, has just been very comprehensive, because we've presented avenues from your side and from my side. So I think there are ways for people to see the simplicity of infinite being and the fact that it is already present. And the main thing to be aware of, I feel, is that it's the element of personalization and ownership that is the thing which is most compelling. So for instance, if we accepted invitations into lower frequency experience in the past, they're actually being beamed to us. So the mind is like a radio receiver, and those invitations are being beamed into our mind. And the tendency is to personalize those, because it does sound as though they're to do with us, but actually they're just invitations. And when we make that distinction between what is actually being delivered as an invitation, and then thinking that it's who we are, that within that distinction is freedom.
I hope you've enjoyed our conversation with David Bingham. To learn more about David, visit his website at nonconceptualawareness.com. That's nonconceptualawareness.com. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe so you have immediate access to future episodes. Please give us a 5-star rating and share it with the people you care about. If you'd like to learn more about my work, my mentor Lester Levenson's work, and the Sedona method, please visit www.sedona.com. As you explore our site, you'll learn the key to lasting happiness, success, peace, and emotional well-being. We have books, courses, events, and plenty of free material to explore. Again, go to sedona.com. That's sedona.com. Thank you for being here, and we'll catch you on the next episode of Letting Go and the Greatest Secret.